frankly, some of our closest friends and allies in the Indo-Pacific, brings our parties together. One small, but I'd say actually very large measure of this is that the USICA bill, the U.S. Innovation and Competitiveness Act, which is a bill to invest in ourselves, to invest significantly in critical strategic resources, and to help strengthen our engagement with our allies. It's a $250 billion, 2,400-page sweeping bill. It passed the Senate back in June by, I think it was a vote of 68 to 32. And in the run-up to that, Senator Risch, who's the leading Republican on the Foreign Relations Committee, worked incredibly closely with Chairman Menendez. And the foreign relations components of this legislation passed the committee, Jim, 21-1. And Senator Risch has also just released a report on how the EU and NATO and our other critical partners are moving closer in harmony in terms of a common view. So I think it is uniting us internally in recognizing that investing in our own democracy is absolutely essential, but it's also helping pull us closer together with our allies. We need to get this passed. The House needs to take it up and send it to the president's desk. It would be the most significant accomplishment of this Congress, in my view, if that were to happen. We did just pass a bipartisan infrastructure bill, which is about rebuilding roads and bridges and tunnels and broadband. This would be about rebuilding our national capacity for research and innovation, which is essential if we're going to successfully compete with China. But it's also implicitly showing that we can come together as a democracy and legislate effectively.
It's interesting because I remember back in April, and I just sort of revisited this as I was researching this panel, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, of which you, Senator Risch, are the ranking Republican member, and last time we spoke, you were the chairman of that committee. Politics changes, we live in democracies, this is what happens. And back in April, the Strategic Competition Act was getting passed by 21-1, so it shows an enormous degree inside the committee of unanimity. But what struck me at the time was a particular phrase from Bob Menendez, who's the chairman of that committee, the Democratic chairman of that committee, and he spoke of, and I quote, "a cascade of legislative activity for our nation to finally meet the China challenge across every dimension of power." And it seems to me that there is a cascade going on. Earlier this month, you yourself, if I'm not mistaken, introduced the Taiwan Deterrence Act. Can you tell us, because there is so much going on, first of all, what is, Senator Coons referred to one, what actually is out there that has a realistic chance of becoming law, and what else is coming down the road as part of this cascade that Senator Menendez referred to?
Well, I think, first of all, one of the things this underscores is that everybody here reads in the media about the toxic atmosphere in the United States Senate, et cetera, et cetera. And certainly we are in real disagreement on some very important domestic spending issues. When it comes to foreign relations, nothing could be further from the truth. When I was chairman of the committee, a couple of the initiatives I started on, one was the China bill, as has been referenced here, and the other was a global health bill, which is very tied to this and has to do with the pandemic, the next pandemic that's coming, probably out of China. The long and short of it was when Congress turned over and Senator Menendez became chairman again and I became ranking member, that carried on. And I worked very closely with Senator Coons, with Senator Shaheen, who's here, who's also on the committee. And by the way, if you got an ethics problem, you don't have a problem here because you have half of the ethics committee of the Senate sitting here. But in any event, it is China is and has to be our major foreign policy issue. And it's something that we're all focused on. And I think your observation that there is this cascade of legislation, I guess it was Bob's view of that. The United States Congress is focused on it. It hasn't been that way. I'd say it has been building, fair statement.
Absolutely.
we're coming together on this. I think that there is a realistic possibility that a China bill will pass, and I think there's a realistic possibility that my global health bill will pass eventually. All these things are, our system was not designed to pass stuff. Our system was designed to kill stuff, and it's very efficient at that at times. And but when it was designed, we'd just come off of this nasty little dust up with our friends in Great Britain, but didn't have a lot of trust for government. So that's the way we were constructed. It is what it is, and we have to live with it, and we get through it.
We may be outperforming these days in our design
perhaps,
standards.
Yeah. Well, we are outperformers. But in any event, this big issue, I sat here and listened to the talk. Look, China is a competitor of ours, not just ours, but virtually everybody in the room here. It is a competitor, certainly economically, militarily, and I think most importantly, culturally. And they have grown so fast and so quickly that they're not performing the way the rest of the world performs. And they even excuse themselves in that regard. I've had some robust discussions with our Chinese friends, and they say, well, you know, you people have been at it for a long time. Yes, we have. We developed international norms for decades, and in some of our cases, centuries, as we've traded amongst each other and dealt with each other. And China is now come to where it has. And my message to them was, yeah, and you need to get on board. And if you do, things are going to be good. If not, we all got a lot of problems in front of us.
The United States Constitution notwithstanding, Senator Coons, your party holds the House, the Senate, and the White House. And when it comes to China, you've got the Republicans on side to a very significant degree. You should be in a pretty strong position to do some serious pushback. Hold that thought, and let's refer to the annual report which came out on Wednesday of the US-China Economic and Security Review Commission. And I'll quote a couple of lines from it. One, it said, China, and I quote, will likely continue escalating its combative approach absent coordinated action from the US and its allies and partners. But furthermore, and I quote again, China's leadership is increasingly uninterested in compromise, close quotes. So you might be doing quite a lot, but they don't seem to be getting the memo, do they? How much tougher are you going to have to be to really make a difference?
Well, I think the most significant thing we can, and frankly we must do, is to take decisive actions to heal our own democracy. Frankly, January 6th caused ripples of grave concern on the part of our closest allies and partners around the world, and emboldened Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, autocrats around the world, those who would wish us ill. There's a bunch of things I've been working on in this regard. Senator Cornyn and I have a $1 billion Reinvest in Civics education bill that has very broad bipartisan support. Senator Wicker and I are leading a bill on national service, on inspiring a young generation of Americans to get to know each other in the way my own father did, serving in the 1st Infantry as a young sergeant in the Army, and getting to know Americans of all backgrounds. Military service or civilian national service through AmeriCorps are opportunities for us to come back together. There's things we have to do to make sure that our elections are free and fair and open, first. But second, there's a lot we can and should do in order to send clear and strong signals that despite some of our policy differences, there is this through line that we are united in the cause of freedom within our nation, and that we intend to lock arms with our allies who share those same views. Some of the critical challenges we all face as a world right now, getting through and out of this pandemic, dealing with climate change, dealing with nuclear proliferation, dealing with trade, and the ways in which our middle classes are pushing back on issues like migration and globalization. We can only work through these issues together. I took a bipartisan delegation to Brussels 2 weeks ago when we visited with NATO and EU leadership. Was very encouraged to hear the ways in which we are moving in the same direction, both in our strategic planning and in our view of China. And frankly, one of the other things, I'll close on this, that we need to be doing better together is development financing. The Belt and Road Initiative has been a sincere, serious, persistent effort by China to finance their way into engagements in countries around the world. that are mercantilist, that are extractive, that do not advance transparency. We have to partner with our European, Scandinavian, Indo-Pacific allies in advancing development finance alternatives through our newly strengthened Development Finance Corporation that have higher standards for environment and labor, but most importantly, transparency, and that provide an alternative for countries in Southeast Asia and South Asia, the North Pacific, throughout the world. The subcommittee I chair just posted its appropriations bill. It includes $300 million specifically for countering Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific, and it adds significantly to the Development Finance Corporation for exactly these reasons. We have to broaden our tools, we have to broaden our ambition and our reach, and we have to do it together.
Back to your specific question, I don't think it's a matter of them not getting the message. I think it's a matter of they don't care. If you deal with them on a day-to-day or month-to-month, week-to-week basis, as a lot of us have over the years, there has been a significant change in the Chinese attitude towards the rest of us. They were...
Well, that's exactly what the report said. They're increasingly uninterested in compromise.
Exactly, yeah, and it's so obvious. If you're looking for a turning point, that where it became obvious, where the iceberg came out of the water, was probably the discussion between our Secretary of State and National Security Advisor with the Chinese in front of the media in Alaska in January of this year. I was, well, first of all, I was surprised that they did it the way they did it, but that was their decision. I mean, our diplomats. But then secondly, I was virtually shocked when I saw how the Chinese rose up and slapped back. I mean, that was very much unlike the way they've always been polite. We've got a business called Micron Technology in Idaho who's been badly abused by the Chinese, and I've taken it up with every one of them. And believe me, there's no defense for what they did. And they were always quite humble about it. They didn't rise up and bite you. But that's what's going on now. They've gotten so big. They've gotten so powerful. They know it. They know what's happening out there. And for instance, the Olympics, when we talk about it, I'm in favor of sending a message. I think we all are. But anybody who thinks that sending the diplomats to the Olympics is going to cause them to start doing inward thinking about where they are, I think is dreaming. I think there's got to be there's going to have to be substantially more than that. It will be symbolic, I agree, and it should be symbolic. But it ain't going to move those. They're just not going to move them.
But it might if there was actually a full-scale boycott of the
I disagree with that.
Okay.
I don't think it will move them. I think that they are headed down the road that they're headed down, and they've been very clear about it. They put one foot in front of the other and make progress every day. I don't think that's going to move them. It's going to take all of us. I mean, all of us working together. I wrote a report, as Chris suggested, a year ago now, and it's somewhat out of date, but it's a good China 101 bill for anybody who doesn't understand them, about the kinds of things that need to be done. And primary there was the United States and Europe have got to come together to push back. And you know, we went through this thing with Huawei. That should have been a no-brainer right at the outset. But instead, we have done everything we could to bring everybody on board, and we still don't have everybody. Canada, in case you're listening, but the other of the Five Eyes are all on board, and most of our allies around the world have finally recognized the danger of embracing that kind of a technology that would be all-encompassing around the world. I mean, the danger there is absolutely stunning.
Senator Coons, at the beginning of about this time last week, or almost this time last week, there was the mini summit between President Biden and Chairman Xi, and certainly, as you referred to, Senator, the tone was much better than the debacle
it was
in
less
Alaska.
Bad.
Yes, it was less bad. But I mean, you know, and Xi Jinping referred to President Biden as his old friend, and President Biden didn't actually say Mr. Xi was his old friend, but he said we always, you know, speak candidly and speak frankly. So the tone was good, but the underlying, apart from a few things about some minor adjustments to journalistic visas and so on, it didn't really seem there was anything that, to come back to the issue, is going to really frighten Xi Jinping here. You're known to be very close to the president, and I know you're not going to speak for the president, but do you have the impression that that President Biden and the administration realizes that, or thinks, I would even put it that way, thinks that really we're going to have to be a lot tougher in the pushback against China than even we've been so far if we're going to make a difference?
Yes.
He does.
Well, I don't speak for him. I absolutely have the impression that
Yes.
he's perfectly clear-eyed about just how significantly China has, to the point Jim was making, risen and changed. That under Xi Jinping's leadership, the Chinese Communist Party has consolidated power. They've become far more assertive and aggressive in the region, and they pose a systemic threat globally. We are seeing the rules of the road being rewritten right in front of us. There was a near miss on the World Intellectual Property Organization, where under the previous administration, at the last minute, the United States joined with a bunch of our allies in making sure that the head of the WIPO was from a country that actually respects intellectual property. At other places, the Human Rights Commission, UNESCO, other UN entities, China is now making a sort of broad spectrum engagement on standard setting bodies that are essential for next generation technologies. We have to play full on. So whether it's in cyber or space, whether it's in trade or it's in global public health or it's just in physical security, we've got a real challenge on our hands, and there is no way through this on our own. We can only do this with our close allies who share our core values, and I'm confident the President's clear about that.
Just before I come to the audience, and I will come to the audience in 1 minute, let me just ask a follow-up question to that. Insofar as there's a lot of legislation in the Senate, in the House at the moment, if we're going to take it to the next level, is it a question of just passing what's already there, or is there a sense, is there a feeling, look, we actually need to push things to an entirely new level here, and we need to really push a lot harder than even you are doing now? Senator Risch.
Well, I think you ought to view this like the laundry. This is never done. There's stuff that's in process right now. There's things that we're already talking about that isn't in bill form yet. But this is a 21st century problem, and it will go on long after we're gone. And people need to roll up their sleeves and commit to doing this for the long term. And the only way it gets done is if we all stick together on this. Those that don't believe in an autocratic form of government, those of us that believe in democracy, those that believe that a governing body should only be there if there's consent of the governed. China doesn't believe any of that stuff. They've stolen every idea that America has to get to where they have today. They did it the old-fashioned way. They stole it, except for our democracy, our freedoms, and the free market system that we have. Other than that, they've taken everything we've got, and look, have come centuries in the last few decades. I was there in 1983. I looked around and thought, we're never going to have to worry about this. Boy, was I wrong. I mean, it didn't take long, and they were up and going.
Thank you. The gentleman right there had his hand up last time, so I got to do it this time. And again, if you keep these really short, we'll be able to get more and more people in to ask questions to the senators.
Very short. Vago Maranian from Defense and Aerospace Report. One of the questions I have is, if you were a Martian and came down on regular centers, whether or not we're moving the capability needles as quickly as Admiral Aquilino and the entire team needs it, you would say it's not moving that fast. From the standpoint of two senior members of the Senate, are we moving as fast as we need to be moving to field the kind of capabilities and sort of integrated national approach that we need to continue to deter China?
Thank you. We'll take one more. This gentleman here had his hand up very first last time. I didn't ask him, so he's definitely getting it now.
Stu Magnuson with National Defense Magazine. I had this question for the last panel, but I'll ask you guys. During the last meeting with the Quad, there was a statement and a lot of technological goals were set. The four nations were going to cooperate. When pandemic response, they're going to cooperate, taking on China presumably in 5G. And scholarships were mentioned to increase the talent and other kind of some technological goals. How realistic that these four diverse nations can really come together to kind of create an alliance, a technology alliance to take on China's mighty R&D enterprise?
So just deal with either of those questions as you see fit, Senator Coons.
No. Nothing focuses the mind like an existential threat. And frankly, the experience of Australia. I think all of us are taking note, and I think all of our close allies are taking note of just how forcefully and aggressively the Chinese delivered that, sort of list of 14 demands. And what's happened with Australia since they decided as a society to stand up and stand strong. And I think that's one of the key informative experiences here, whether it's in the South China Sea or it's in 5G, whether it's in how they're conducting their campaign with vaccines, far less effective than the vaccines developed under Operation Warp Speed by the previous administration and now being globally deployed by the current administration. We have opportunities here. Pulling the Quad together is going to take a lot of work. It's not obvious that it's going to work quickly or easily or well, but nothing focuses the mind like seeing the experiences of close and trusted allies that are frighteningly difficult.
Senator Risch, tech alliances. I remember.
Well, first, let me answer no. But that Martian should also be told that we have a very, very robust discussion every year and debate in the United States Congress about social spending versus defense spending. And it is spirited, and I would say the pendulum swings back and forth depending upon which administration or which party is in power. But we seem to drop back a bit, and then we catch up a bit. That's not a good way to do business, but unfortunately, politics come into play here, and you can only do what you can do with the numbers that you have. Response to your question, I'd say the jury's out on that question. I think I'm optimistic, and the reason I'm optimistic is that we and the allies that make up the Quad are very good at rising to a challenge. And if you look at what China's doing, they are creating a challenge for us. And so we have no choice but to do what you've suggested, and that is rise to the occasion. So I'm optimistic in that regard. Without that challenge being there, I wouldn't be nearly as optimistic. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lady here. I can't see because, again, it's... oh, there we go. And then we'll come to the gentleman there who's had his hand up forever. Yes.
Thanks so much. Heather Hurlbert from New America in Washington. As an American, thank you both so much for what you're doing to create and show some common ground on these issues. As, of course, most people in the room are aware, it's really hard to move out with the speed and alacrity you've just called for when, Senator Risch, your party is holding more than 40 of America's diplomats who would be representing the U.S. in most of the countries represented in our conversations today. I'd love to hear you talk a bit about how we're going to get beyond what has gone way beyond the normal partisan gamesmanship we have at the beginning of an administration. We have no one on the ground in China. We have no one on the ground in most of our allies, our development finance that Senator Coons referred to. So I'd love to hear from you what the way forward on that is.
Well, since I need to defend that, how come you don't get tough questions? Look, this is a political matter. I'm used to answering this question since I'm the ranking member on the committee. We went through the same thing with the Trump administration. These are political matters. It's really and I have been a critic of this since I started on the Foreign Relations Committee. I was a governor. I understand you have to have a team in place in order to govern. I have been as energetic as I can about getting those through. I think we should have a much better system for doing that. We have on the floor, the committee is not the problem. We've worked, Menendez and I have worked together to move these through. Would you agree with that, Senator Coons? So then it goes to the floor of the Senate. Well, that's a matter between Senator McConnell and Senator Schumer. And since they're not here to defend themselves, I'm not going to defend them either. So you'll have to take it up with them. But we have a process. We have a process by which any senator can hold up a nominee if they want by objecting, and then without getting too far in the weeds, if those in charge want to move it, they got to slow walk it through. They can get it done, but it takes up a lot of time. And so if your criticism is we need more, we need our ambassadors out there, I couldn't agree with you more. We all know dealing with ambassadors is entirely different than dealing with a charge at each of the embassies, but I agree.
And we've got, I think the current count is 54 nominees out of the committee on the floor. Whatever the challenges are in the committee, they're nothing compared to the floor. This is predominantly the work of one senator.
And one word, Nord Stream 2.
And I'll remind you that the 9/11 Commission identified the absence of a number of senior filled confirmed positions in the Bush administration as one of the key reasons that we failed to perceive and respond to the threat information that was coming in at the time. This is putting us at real risk as a country.
Please, and also, if you don't ask the hard question to somebody's got to ask a hard question to Senator Coons, otherwise it'd be unfair to Senator Rish.
I'm deeply offended, deeply offended.
Well, hi. Can you listen? Yes.
Yeah.
I'm Mauricio Mechulan from the Mexico Research Center for Peace, and I would like to bring back the point of Senator Tim Kaine yesterday, because the message that we outside the U.S. received back, not only the January 6th, but in general, what we're receiving is that the U.S. is not united. So you are speaking a lot about having alliances, strong alliances, and unite with your partners and friends outside. We don't see that the U.S. is united inside. That is the message we are getting. So how can you stand on China?
But you mean generally, because
Yeah, in general.
there does seem to be quite a lot of unity on China itself.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm shocked to hear that we appear not united. I don't understand. We are a robust democracy, and you're absolutely right. We are united on some things, other things we are not united on, but that's what a democracy. Nobody ever said democracy was pretty. Nobody ever said it was the easiest way to do things, but by golly, we're a free people.
And if I could just add a thought. First, I'm glad there was a productive summit between our three leaders, Mexico, Canada, United States. Senator Kaine led a bipartisan delegation that went to Mexico City, had a wonderful meeting with AMLO and with other leaders. But frankly, the one thing we all have in common in open and free societies is that disinformation, intentional disinformation campaigns by state actors, and in particular the pernicious role of social media in further isolating us and in that's probably the wrong word to use, in leading us into communities that don't understand each other or respect each other enough.
Yeah,
we'll come up with another word.
We can't Southeast Europeanize.
Southeast Europeanized.
Okay.
We have to address these critical sources of division in our society.
Is it final question from the lady up there? And then I'm afraid we have to leave it.
Hi, I actually have a hard question for Senator Coons. So.
Oh, good. I hope she's a Republican. The last one that got me was a Democrat.
Kelly Curry from the Center for New American Security. One of the biggest challenges I think that we face, especially in implementing key priorities of the current administration on climate, is that our solar energy supply chain almost totally dependent on Chinese production. Lithium-ion batteries almost totally dependent on Chinese production lines, and these things are implicated in forced labor, and the production processes are very dirty and consume a lot of and produce a lot of carbon in the process as well. Setting aside expectations about whether China is serious about their commitments to reduce emissions, this does create a serious problem that we are so dependent on these Chinese supply chains for green energy and for a green energy future. And if you add to that concerns about the way that John Kerry in Glasgow talked about how, I'm quoting him directly, that concerns about human rights are, quote, not in his lane, that he's the climate guy. Yeah, he actually did say that. And when you know that this is a real problem, Senator Rich mentioned the Huawei and how the previous administration operated the clean network to combat the problem of Huawei and 5G. Is this a solution that can be applied with the green energy and and tech issues that we need to change the supply chains? And is this something that both parties can work on together?
Yes. To be concise, if I can, across 3 different pieces of legislation, the infrastructure bill, which is now law, the Build Back Better Act, which I believe is going to get through the Senate and to the President, and USICA, the Innovation and Competitiveness Act. There's significant investments in addressing supply chain, in diversifying sources for strategic minerals, and the bipartisan delegation that I led to COP26 had specific conversations about the ways in which we have to come up with alternative supply chains that are not poisoned, tainted by the genocide against the Uyghurs that is ongoing. I did have a delightful conversation with the Canadian ambassador to the United States last night about ways in which we should be looking to our close regional allies and partners for sources of strategic minerals. We should be aligning our priorities around, for example, a border carbon adjustment that could bring closer together a carbon club of democracies who are close allies. We can and should, I think, find ways that we can use our focus on digital democracy and on climate ambition to also bring together countries who are committed to free and open societies, and to be clear-eyed about the ways in which China, as a source of supply, puts us at risk. We experienced this in the pandemic. We are going to continue to experience it even as we try to make progress on climate. We cannot say we put human rights first and only source solar panels from that portion of the world which is currently experiencing genocide.
Senator Risch, 30 seconds as we close on that, or anything else?
Well, I think John Kerry probably wished he hadn't put it in those terms, but it generally states the proposition that, as Senator Kuntz has said, we've got to walk and chew gum at the same time. Is that a fair summarization of it? I agree. I agree 100% with it. It's. I think you said you questioned China's commitment to reducing carbon, et cetera. I think they're absolutely committed to it. Number one, as long as it isn't too hard, and number two, it doesn't cost them anything. Other than that, I think they're fully committed.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking sincerely the 2 senators. Thank you.
This concludes the morning program. Lunch is being served in the Atlantic Ballroom.